Yelen Rook woke up with the wrong kind of warmth. The service bunks on a Styrian spire were engineered for function: a narrow slab, a thin thermal weave, and just enough clearance to convince your spine it still lived in a universe with mercy. Yelen had spent 3 years in them. He knew exactly how much room he was allowed to take up. So when he opened his eyes to find he had none, his first thought was that the station's artificial gravity had finally decided to get personal. He lay still, letting his brain run its usual diagnostic checklist: breathing, present, heartbeat, steady, hull vibration, normal, the faint, ever-present thrum of the station's coolant arteries, humming like a sleepy beast behind the bulkheads. Then something small and heavy shifted on his chest. Another weight pressed into his side. Warmer than blanket heat. Alive, Jelen's eyes opened fully. 2 children were asleep on him, like they'd been assigned there by a scheduling algorithm. Pale skin with a soft, opalescent sheen in the bunk light. Fine silver blonde hair scattered across his pillow, and ears long, tapered, unmistakably not human, twitching once before settling again. They breathed in uneven, deep sleep rhythms, mouths slack with the serious trust of the exhausted. Yelen did not move, not because he was calm, but because calm was what you pretended to be when reality made a sudden sharp turn. His second thought arrived right on the heels of the first. Hallucinations didn't drool on your shirt. Somewhere outside his door, the station's alarms began to sing. Asterian's alarm system didn't screech. It didn't shriek. It wailed with cultured dignity, like an orchestra hired to panic you politely. The sound seeped through the walls, steady and insistent, and immediately carried with it the meaning everyone on the spire understood. Lockdown. Seals would be closing. Corridors would be pinched off like veins under pressure. Security would pour into the royal ring with weapons held carefully low. Because the royal ring was where the consequences lived. Yelen swallowed and looked back down at the 2 sleeping aliens currently using him as furniture. He knew their faces. Everyone did. Princesses Arya and Nyx of the Lumen Court twins, heirs. The kind of children you only saw on ceremonial feeds, where they stood perfectly posed beside their mother, Empress Saphine, and waved with smiles that looked practiced in mirror rooms. In Jelen's bunk, they looked smaller, softer, less like symbols and more like kids who'd crawled into the nearest quiet place and decided it belonged to them. Arya shifted, pressing her forehead against his collarbone, her fingers small. Strong tightened in the fabric of his work shirt, as if anchoring herself against a current. Nyx mumbled something unintelligible and scooted closer. Offended by the concept of personal boundaries, Jelen's hands hovered above them, awkward and useless, like he wasn't sure whether touching them would set off an alarm all on its own. "Okay," he whispered to the ceiling. "This is new." Footsteps thundered past his door. Voices snapped commands in the clipped cadence of palace security. The kind of urgency that didn't waste breath on full sentences. His door panel chimed. The twins woke instantly. Their eyes opened wide, dark irises threaded with a faint luminescence that caught the bunk light and threw it back like polished stone. They didn't cry. They didn't scream. They simply latched onto him, both of them, With the quick instinct of frightened creatures choosing cover, Arya folded into his chest. Nyx wrapped around his side, their ears flattened slightly, trembling. Yelen made a small sound that wasn't quite a word. The door slid open. Armored security filled the frame, a wall of composite plating and controlled breathing. Their helmets were off, but their faces were the same, tight, trained, caught between protocol and disbelief. Weapons were raised, then very deliberately angled away from the bed. No one moved for a long, strange moment. Yelen raised one hand, slow as a man trying not to startle a reactor. "Morning," he said, because panic apparently had taken personal. "Leave." A guard lifted his palm, fingers spread, as if Yelen might bolt. Yelen considered pointing out the obvious, that he was pinned under to royal fugitives and a blanket, but decided his odds were better if he let the professionals narrate their own nightmare. Behind the security line, advisors crowded the corridor, robes whispering. A hovering scanner drone drifted forward, its lens dilating. Nyx whimpered. Arya tightened her grip so hard Yelen felt his ribs complain. The drone immediately backed away, dimming, as if ashamed of itself. "Technician Rook," the lead guard said carefully, "do not move." "I wasn't planning to," Yelen said. "They've attached." The joke landed like a tool dropped in an empty shaft. The corridor's noise shifted. Footsteps approached slower, heavier, accompanied by the kind of hush that spreads when power enters a space. The security line snapped to attention. Empress Safine stepped into view. In broadcasts she had always looked tall. In person she looked like the room had been built around her and hadn't dared complain. Her long ears were adorned with thin chains of gold that moved when she stopped short. Eyes locking on the scene for a heartbeat. Her expression was unreadable. The twins felt her presence before they looked. Their bodies went rigid. "Mother," Arya whispered. The word barely air. Safine took one step forward, then stopped, because both children recoiled and clutched Yelen tighter, as if he were a bulkhead. Something cracked in the Empress's eyes, not a collapse, just a hairline fracture in a surface that had been polished by decades of rule. Yelen swallowed. "Your Radiance," he said, because apparently he was greeting monarchs from bed now. "I can explain, or I can panic. I have range." The advisors made distressed noises, like a choir practicing disapproval. Safine lifted a hand, silencing them without looking away from Yelen. "How long have they been here?" she asked. Yelen blinked. "Since before I woke up. I asleep pretty hard." A guard gave him a look that suggested sleeping might be a capital offense. Safine lowered herself slowly to one knee, careful, as if approaching skittish animals. "Arya, Nyx, come to me," she said, voice gentle. They didn't move. Yelen shifted, adjusting the blanket around them on instinct. The simple motion made the entire room tense. "I haven't told them to do anything," he said, palms open. "I don't think I could, even if I tried. They're committed." Safine's gaze softened despite herself. She reached toward them and stopped. "Short, you are safe," she murmured. The twins exchanged a glance, then shook their heads in perfect unison. "No guards," Nyx whispered. "No shouting Arya added. Yelen winced. Somewhere, an advisor just fainted. I can feel it. Safin straightened. Clear the corridor. She ordered. Leave us. The protests died under the weight of her tone. The doorway emptied until only the Empress, Yelen, and the two children remained, with two guards posted farther back like statues holding their breath. In the sudden quiet, the station alarms felt distant, almost embarrassed. Safin studied. Yelen not like a ruler assessing a threat, but like a mother trying to solve a riddle. He didn't look powerful. He looked tired. His quarters smelled faintly of coolant sealant and machine oil. A coil of cable sat on a shelf beside a half-disassembled access panel. He was, in every visible way, a man built out of ordinary parts. And yet her daughters clung to him as if he were the only stable thing left in the universe. You will come with me, Safin said at last. All of you? Yelen nodded. Sure. Should I stand? Or is this a carry situation? Nix yawned, unbothered by Imperial protocol, and promptly fell back asleep on his shoulder. The council chamber was designed to make visitors feel small, which Yelen resented on principle. He'd repaired its climate modulators twice, crawling behind its pristine panels while people in ceremonial robes pretended he didn't exist. The ceiling was a dome of transparent alloy, beyond which space pressed close black, cold, endless. Today, every seat was filled. Security chiefs stood like coiled springs. Advisors clustered in stiff semicircles. Medical officers hovered beside portable scanners. Pretending the situation was normal, Yelen entered with the twins attached too. Kin like living proof that gravity could be ignored when it got in the way of preference. He tried holding them in his arms. They'd objected, loudly and with impressive coordination. So now Arya clung to his left side and Nyx perched on his right shoulder, arms locked around his neck as if she'd been born there. Conversation died the moment he crossed the threshold. This is cozy, Yelen said, glancing around. Very welcoming. Really brings out my pause. No one laughed. Safin moved to the elevator dais but didn't sit. She stood with her hands clasped behind her back, ears angled forward in alert restraint. Begin scans, she ordered. A medical drone floated closer, emitting a soft harmonic hum meant to soothe young minds. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Both twins stiffened. Their eyes snapped open. Their grips tightened so sharply Yelen wheezed. Okay, he said quickly. No humming robots. Noted. Firmly noted. The drone retreated, dimming as if ashamed. Safin's gaze sharpened. Technician Rook, you will tell us everything. Yelen swallowed, then shrugged. Because what else did you do when a room full of powerful people stared at you? Like a malfunctioning part? I fell asleep, he said. I woke up. They were there. That's the full event log. I didn't lure them, summon them, or knowingly harbor royalty. I don't even know how they got past the service locks. Unless someone hasn't updated access keys in OSE, the last 6 months like I've been requesting. The senior security architect shifted, offended by the implication that an unglamorous system could matter. Safin didn't look away from Yelen. My daughters have barely spoken since the attack, she said quietly, They refused contact with guards, with medics, with me. Yelen adjusted his stance so Arya wouldn't slip. They talked to me, he said, mostly about machines and biscuits. Nix nodded solemnly. Your biscuits are sad. A sharp inhale moved through the advisors like a gust. Safin closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, as if absorbing the absurdity and the ache in the same breath. Why you? She asked. The question hung in the chamber, heavy with politics and fear. Yelen hesitated not because he was afraid, but because the answer felt almost too simple for a room built to hold grand strategies. My quarters are quiet, he said. The lights don't glare. Nothing explodes nearby. I don't shout. The twins tightened their hold, silent agreement. For the first time, the chamber felt unsteady not physically, but emotionally. Like a structure realizing one of its assumptions was wrong, Safin studied him. And Yelen had the strange sensation of being seen, not as a tool, not as a problem, as a person the station had somehow chosen. Outside the dome, stars drifted on, indifferent. Inside, the most powerful people aboard a Styrian spire were forced to confront an inconvenient truth. Safety had crawled into a maintenance bunk and taken up residence. Yelen realized he'd been reassigned when his wrist comm chirped and displayed a route that did not lead back to the service decks. Instead, a polite glowing line traced directly into the royal ring. This feels like the part where I'm supposed to ask permission, Yelen muttered as he walked, the twins still attached, like determined barnacles. You already belong with us, Arya said matter-of-factly, ear pressed against his shoulder. Yelen stopped walking. The guards escorting them stopped too, boots locking in synchronized alarm. I'm sorry, Yelen said carefully. Could you repeat that? But maybe in a way that doesn't sound like I've been claimed as territory? Nix frowned, considering. You are ours because you are safe. Yelen exhaled and resumed walking. That's better, still concerning, but better. The royal ring was quiet in a way the rest of the station wasn't. Not just less noise, less urgency. Light shifted gently as they passed. Temperature stayed steady. The walls were beautiful and smooth, and subtly hostile to small hands. Vents to high, panels sealed flush. No grip points, no hidden corners. No wonder the twins had wandered. They were brought into a smaller strategy chamber adjoining the council hall, filled with translucent displays and softly glowing tables. Safin waited inside, seated now, though her posture still carried steel. Advisors lingered behind privacy fields that didn't muffle their disapproval as much as they thought. Yelen stopped at what he assumed was a respectful distance. The twins dragged him closer. Safin looked down at them. You are exhausting, she said quietly. Nix smiled, unapologetic. Yelen cleared his throat. For the record, your radiance. I have not encouraged this. I don't even let engineers sit on my toolbox. Safin's lips twitched a near smile, startling in its rarity. You have been escorted, scanned, and observed, she said. You have made no demands, no attempt to capitalize on this situation. That's because I don't understand what's happening, Yelen said. And I've learned honesty saves time. Silence stretched long enough for theories to ferment. You will remain in this sector, Safin said at last, provisionally. As technical steward and liaison, you will maintain systems, and you will remain available. For what? Yelen asked. Arya answered before her mother could. For sleeping. Yelen rubbed his face. I knew I should have negotiated a biscuit clause. The advisors began to protest. Safin lifted one finger. The words died mid-birth. My daughters have chosen, she said. I will not teach them that choice leads only to punishment. Yelen shifted, suddenly aware of the invisible line he'd crossed. I don't want to interfere, he said softer. I'm not important. The twins bristled like small cats. You fix things. Nyx said, chin lifted. Yelen blinked, surprised by the warmth that rose in his chest. Yeah, he admitted. I do. Safin stepped closer. For the first time, she looked at him not as a ruler or mother, but as someone evaluating a structure under stress. Then help fix this, she said, not as a symbol, as yourself. The station changed around him in ways no one officially acknowledged. Doors in the royal ring opened a fraction faster, as if anticipating his approach. Environmental systems adjusted more frequently, smoothing temperature gradients that had been ignored for years. Even the background hum shifted pitch. The spire felt like an old engine learning a new pattern and rewriting itself accordingly. Yelen noticed because technicians always noticed. The twins treated his presence as a correction to reality. They followed him into maintenance crawl spaces, sat cross-legged beside him while he worked, and argued over who got to hand him which tool. Their ears flicked at diagnostic chirps. Their heads tilted in perfect mirrored curiosity. This one, Nyx said once, reaching toward a coil far too close to live current. Yelen nudged her hand away gently. That one explodes if you insult it. Arya nodded gravely. We will be polite. A ceremonial guard watching nearby looked like he'd been reassigned to a nightmare. The real test came during what should have been a routine systems check if anything involving royal security could still be called routine. Yelen was halfway inside a wall panel when the lights dimmed. Not enough for alarms. Just enough to make a technician's spine tighten. That's not supposed to happen, he said. Calm in a way that meant very much the opposite. Security. Fields flared. Doors sealed. The twins moved instantly, pressing against him, gripping his sleeves with cold-finger urgency. His implant fed him system data at a speed that made his teeth ache. Unauthorized override. Origin. Internal. That's rude, Yelen muttered. Guards flooded the corridor. Safin arrived moments later, expression hard as polished alloy. Yelen stood, keeping an arm around each child. Not external, he said before anyone asked. Someone inside just tried to rewrite defense control through maintenance backdoors. Sloppy, too. Left signatures all over the command stack. Safin's eyes narrowed. Can you trace it? Yelen hesitated. Yes, but I should warn you I'm about to offend someone important. Please do, Safin said, voice like a blade. Yelen interfaced with the station. Asterion responded to him like an old colleague, opening restricted channels, revealing buried processes nested behind ceremonial redundancies. Faces appeared on the chamber display's advisors, officials, and one senior security architect whose confidence evaporated in a blink. Elen leaned back slightly. "In your defense," he said conversationally, "most people forget the service corridors exist. I live there." Security moved fast after that. Orders snapped, restraints deployed. Conspirators were removed, some quietly, some with enough public visibility to discourage the next ambitious fool. When the last alert faded and the lights stabilized, the corridor finally exhaled. Nix tugged Jelen's sleeve. "They wanted to make Mother go away," she said quietly. Jelen nodded. "Yeah, they did." Arya looked up at Safin, who stood still as if holding herself together by force of will. "You are still here," Arya said. Safin knelt. She gathered them into her arms. This time, they allowed it, but their hands still reached for Jelen, fingers hooking into his shirt as if anchoring the moment. Safin looked up at him over their heads. "You could have stayed silent." Jelen shrugged. "I fix what's broken." Something like disbelief, then gratitude moved across her face. Later, much later, when the station settled back into its orbit and the twins finally slept in a room meant for them, Jelen sat nearby repairing a light panel that flickered. It was a stupid thing, a small thing, but it bothered him, and maybe that was the point. He realized then that the question had answered itself. The twins hadn't come to him because he was destined or special or secretly royal. They came because he was quiet, because he stayed, because his world was made of doors that closed properly and lights that didn't stutter. And he treated safety like a thing you built with your hands, not a thing you declared with speeches. The following weeks changed the spire's bones. Security protocols were rewritten with service corridors included. Jelen was asked politely, repeatedly, to review them. He did, pointing out flaws with the gentle brutality of someone who understood systems better than politics. Safin stood beside him during the final inspection, hands clasped behind her back, watching the station's schematics rotate in the air. "You could have left," she said. Jelen didn't look away from the display. "I considered it. Then someone asked me to fix a door that didn't seal right, and I lost momentum." To his surprise, Safin laughed, quiet and brief, like a rare mechanical sound. "My daughters sleep through the night now," she said. Jelen nodded. "So do I mostly." The twins burst into the room as if summoned by the mention of sleep, arguing about whether a gravitic stabilizer could make their toys float forever. Jelen listened, offered cautious answers, redirected enthusiasm away from catastrophic misuse. Safin watched them, really watched the man for the first time. She didn't look like a ruler balancing alliances and threats. She looked like a mother standing in a room that finally felt lived in. The formal appointment came later, stripped of excess ceremony. Jelen Rook was named permanent technical steward of Asterian Spire, with advisory authority over internal systems and unrestricted access to service networks. It sounded impressive, until he read the practical implications and realized it mostly meant people would stop telling him where he wasn't allowed to go when the council applauded. Jelen scratched the back of his neck and muttered, "I preferred it when I was invisible." Safin leaned closer. "You were never invisible," she said. We simply didn't know how to look. That night, the station lights dimmed into their gentle cycle. Stars slid into familiar patterns beyond the viewport. Yelen sat on the edge of his newer, wider bunk, reinforced because structural engineers had reluctantly admitted that to royal children using a human as a pillow counted as a recurring load. Arya slept with her head tucked under his arm. Nyx had claimed his shoulder and one ear, which twitched every time he breathed too deeply. Yelen stared at the ceiling and listened to their slow, steady breaths. "This is not how my career counselor described advancement," he murmured. Nyx cracked one eye open. "You fix bigger things now." "That's true," he admitted. "Mostly feelings. Very fragile components." Nyx smiled and drifted back to sleep. Yelen adjusted the blanket, checked the light panel steady now. No flicker, and let himself breathe. Outside, Asterian Spire continued its endless orbit. A stubborn island of order in an indifferent universe. Inside, a maintenance technician stayed where he was needed, and two royal heirs slept like children again, as if the station itself had finally learned what safety actually meant.